People say your 21st birthday is supposed to feel like the beginning of everything. Mine felt like the beginning of something I never asked for. I woke up earlier than I planned that morning. Maybe it was excitement. Maybe it was nerves. Or maybe it was the strange, heavy feeling in my chest, the kind that arrives before a storm you can't see yet. The room felt unusually quiet. The sunlight hadn't fully settled in the curtains. There was this soft, gray stillness in the air, almost like the world was holding its breath for me. I laid there for a moment, listening to the hum of the fan, to the faint creak of the hallway floor, to my own heartbeat that felt just a little too loud. It should have been a happy day. Mom always made birthdays feel big, even when we had very little. She'd stuff my room with sticky notes, tiny messages, little drawings, and a breakfast she pretended she woke up early to cook, but I always knew she stayed up late instead. But this morning was different. No footsteps, no whispered singing, no smell of pancakes, just silence. I pushed the blankets off and sat up slowly. The air in my room felt cold, not from temperature, from something else. Something heavy. Something waiting. I didn't know then that the heaviness wasn't coming from inside the room. It was coming from outside. From the small brown package sitting on our front porch, with my name written in a handwriting I had never seen before. I brushed my hair, tied it into a loose ponytail, and opened my bedroom door. The hallway light was off. The kitchen was quiet. Mom hadn't touched anything. "Mom?" I called softly. No answer. Just the soft ticking of the old wooden clock she bought from a flea market years ago. I walked down the hall and found her sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, hands wrapped around it like she needed the warmth to keep herself from falling apart. She looked up at me and smiled, but it wasn't her birthday smile. It was small, forced, almost nervous. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. Something inside me tightened. She pushed a plate toward me, scrambled eggs slightly burned at the edges, her stress cooking's signature. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. "I'm fine, just tired," she said. But she wasn't tired. She was scared. I didn't know it then, but I would know it soon. We ate breakfast quietly, the kind of quiet where you hear the fork scrape the plate and the clock tick too loudly, and your own thoughts whisper things you're not ready to hear. When I finished eating, Mom cleared her throat. "There's something on the porch for you," she said. My eyebrows lifted. "For me? From who?" She looked away. "I don't know. It was there when I woke up." I stood up fast, and she reached out suddenly, not to stop me, but almost as if she wanted to say something more. She didn't. She just watched me walk to the door, with eyes that held 1,000 unsaid things. I opened the front door, and the morning breeze brushed my face. Cold. Too cold for a summer morning. And there it was. A small, carefully wrapped box. Brown craft paper, twine tied into a simple knot, a single white label, and my name. Not how Mom writes it, not any handwriting I'd ever seen. This handwriting was delicate, but firm, slightly slanted, like someone wrote my name slowly, intentionally, like they'd practiced it. My heart thumped. I crouched down and touched the box. It wasn't heavy, but it felt heavy, like the kind of gift that doesn't celebrate you, it warns you. I picked it up, and the moment it left the ground, I felt something shift in me. Like whatever this wasn't just for my birthday, it was for my past. I brought the box inside and placed it on the kitchen table. Mom stiffened. She didn't even try to hide it. "Did you order something?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." Is it from you? No, she whispered, and the way she said it, small, shaky, like the word hurt her mouth, told me something was very, very wrong. I slid my finger under the knot of twine. Wait, she said suddenly. I stopped. She looked at me with the kind of fear only a parent knows, the fear of something they can't protect you from anymore. Maybe open it later? She whispered. Why? I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the box like it was alive. I sat down, took a deep breath, and pulled the twine loose. The knot fell open, and even though all I did was untie a piece of string, it felt like I had undone something bigger, like a thread holding together a part of my life was just cut. I peeled back the paper slowly. Mom pressed her mouth to her hand. Inside was a wooden box, dark brown, polished, old, beautiful, almost antique. There was no lock, but there was a single carving on the top, a date, my birthday, the exact day I was born. Not today, not 21st birthday, my birth date. My stomach clenched. How did they know that? I whispered. Mom shut her eyes. That's not all, she said. Her voice was barely holding together. Open it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside was a folded letter, a single line handwritten on the front. For my daughter. Open when you turn 21. My breath stopped. Daughter. My chest tightened so hard, it felt like someone was squeezing my heart. Mom covered her face with both hands and began to cry silently. Because she already knew. She knew who it was from. She knew why it was sent. She knew this moment was coming for 21 years. I stared at the letter. Thin paper, shaky handwriting, words that waited my entire life to be read. My hands shook violently. Who sent this? I whispered. Mom lifted her head slowly, eyes red, cheeks wet, and whispered, Your mother. My world tilted. My voice broke. My biological mother? Mom nodded. My vision blurred instantly. And she said you could only read it on your 21st birthday? Her voice trembled. And today is that day. I stared at the letter as the world around me seemed to fade. My mother, the woman I had never met, never heard, never remembered, had sent me something. A message, a truth, a piece of herself, a goodbye, or a beginning. And suddenly, my birthday didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like an opening to a past I wasn't ready for. My fingers touched the edge of the letter, and I felt it. That strange, heavy feeling that woke me up that morning. It wasn't fear, it wasn't excitement. It was the quiet realization that the story of my life was about to change, and the woman who gave me life was finally about to speak. I held the letter for a long time before I could bring myself to open it. The handwriting on the front wasn't elegant. It wasn't neat. It wasn't the kind of handwriting someone uses when they're calm. It looked like someone who wrote while crying, someone whose hands were shaking, someone who wasn't sure if their words would ever be seen. The paper felt thin, fragile, like a breath could tear it apart. Mom sat across from me, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on the letter like it was a ghost she had spent years trying to forget. Do you want me to leave the room? She whispered. I shook my head. No, stay. Because even though I didn't know what the letter held, I knew whatever it was. I didn't want to face it alone. I slid my finger under the flap. The envelope opened with a soft tear, a sound that felt too loud in the silence. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully, like it was meant to be protected. I opened it. The first line hit me like a punch to the chest. My sweet girl, if you're reading this, it means I never made it back. My breath caught. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. The room went completely still. I kept reading, eyes burning. I wanted to be there for your birthdays. All of them. Your first steps. Your first words. Your first heartbreak. But life didn't give me the chance to stay. The ink smudged in several places, small round patches that looked too much like tears. I didn't give you up because I didn't love you. I gave you up because I loved you enough to admit I wasn't strong enough to raise you. My throat tightened so hard I could barely swallow. There were things happening around us that no child should grow up with. You were born into a world I couldn't protect you from. Mom looked down at her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent guilt. I kept reading. The woman raising you now, I chose her. I trusted her. I begged her to give you the life I knew I never could. A tear slid down my cheek. Begged. Chose. Trusted. Everything I thought I knew. Shifted. I couldn't write everything in one letter. Some truths are too heavy to give a child. My fingers trembled. But I needed you to know one thing. You were never unwanted. You were my miracle. My only good decision. My last bit of hope. A sob escaped my chest before I could stop it. Mom reached across the table and held my hand. And that small gesture, that warmth, it hit me so hard, I had to close my eyes. And in that moment, as I held a letter from a woman I'd spent my entire life wondering about, I realized something. There are so many people out there who never got answers to their own past. If you're listening to my story right now, tell me in the comments, do you believe some secrets should stay hidden, or should all truths come out eventually? I really want to know what you think. And if this story has touched your heart even a little, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue this journey together. It means more than you know. Back to the story. I wiped my face and turned back to the letter, because there was more, much more. I left something for you, something I couldn't keep because it hurt too much to hold. Something. I felt my pulse quicken. It's in the box this letter came with, a small silver locket. Inside is a picture of you on the day you were born, and a picture of me. I froze. Mom gasped softly, her hand flying to her chest. I lifted the wooden box again and dug beneath the tissue paper. There it was, a tiny silver heart-shaped locket. Old, scratched, but beautiful. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, on the left, a baby, me, red-faced, eyes shut, wrapped in a white blanket. On the right, a woman, with tired eyes and a broken smile. My mother. My real mother. My breath collapsed in my chest. I had never seen her before. Not in photos, not in passing, not even by accident. This was her. This was the face of the woman who loved me enough to let me go. I turned back to the letter, tears dripping onto the paper. If you ever feel lost, if you ever feel like you don't belong, hold this locket and remember you were loved twice. Once by me, and once by the woman who raised you. Mom cried harder now, quietly, painfully. The final lines were the ones that shattered me completely. I won't be there for your 21st birthday, but I hope this letter is. I hope this locket is. And I hope, wherever you are, you feel me whisper one last time. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I am proud of you, and I am sorry I couldn't stay. I closed the letter and pressed it to my chest, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an abandoned child. I felt like someone who had been loved in ways I never knew. Loved imperfectly, painfully, silently, but loved. The rest of that day moved in slow motion. The letter stayed in my hands long after I finished reading it, as if my fingers refused to let go of the only connection I had to the woman who brought me into this world. Mom sat quietly across from me, with red eyes and trembling hands. Every few minutes, she would open her mouth as if to say something, then close it again. Maybe she didn't want to interrupt my thoughts. Maybe she didn't want to reopen hers. Eventually, she whispered, "Do you want to know more about her?" I lifted my eyes. "Do you know more?" I asked. Mom took a slow breath and looked down at her lap. I knew her better than you think. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "She wasn't just someone who gave birth to you," Mom said softly. "She was my friend." My breath caught. Friend. The word felt heavy, like the truth was standing right behind that single sentence, waiting to be uncovered. Mom looked away. We grew up together, went to the same school. She was shy, quiet, but she had the kindest heart. My chest tightened. "I always wondered," she said bitterly, "if maybe I should have helped her more, fought for her more, stopped her from leaving." I stared at her. "So why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Mom closed her eyes. "Because every time you asked about her, you were already hurting. And I was afraid that knowing the truth would open wounds I didn't know how to heal." I swallowed hard. "What happened to her?" I asked. She hesitated. "She left town," she whispered, "and she never came back." "Where did she go?" "I don't know." The way she said it, quiet, raw, filled with old guilt, told me she wasn't lying. But it also told me something else. She was hiding more. That evening, after Mom went to her room, I sat on my bed with the locket in my hand. I traced the ridges with my thumb, the scratches, the faded silver, the tiny hinge that squeaked when it opened. Inside, my baby photo smiled in a blurry, wrinkled way, and beside it, my mother's face looked like a memory I never had, but somehow recognized. Her eyes, they looked like mine. Her expression, a mixture of strength and sadness, the same expression I saw in the mirror every time life felt heavier than I could carry. I pressed the locket to my chest and whispered, "Where are you?" The silence didn't answer. It rarely does. But something inside me whispered back anyway, a quiet, persistent voice. "Find her." The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I spread the letter across my desk and studied every word, every shaky stroke, every smudge, every tiny indentation. Something inside me believed she left something more, a clue, a hint, a message hidden between the lines. I read it again, and again, and again, until my eyes ached. And then I saw it. Near the bottom, barely visible beneath the ink, something was pressed into the paper. Not written, indented. A second line, a faint impression of something she had written and then erased. Or perhaps something she wrote before she changed her mind. I held the paper up toward the window. and under the sunlight, the hidden words appeared. If anything happens to me, ask Anna. My breath stopped. Anna. A name. A person. A connection. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who knew her. Someone I had to find. I ran to the kitchen where Mom was making tea. "Mom," I said breathlessly, "do you know anyone named Anna?" Her entire body stiffened. The spoon fell from her hand. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, as if the name itself had knocked the breath out of her. Finally, with a trembling voice, she whispered, "Where did you hear that name?" "It was in the letter," I said, holding it out. "She mentioned Anna. Who is she?" Mom swallowed painfully. "She was your mother's sister." My heart thudded. "I have an aunt?" I whispered. Mom nodded slowly. "Yes, you do." "Where is she now?" I asked. Mom closed her eyes. "I don't know." But the way she said it told me the truth. She did know. Or at least, she used to, before fear or guilt or time forced her to let that connection fade. I stepped closer. "Mom, I need to find her." Mom stared at me with eyes filled with old fear and new worry. "She might not want to be found," she whispered. "Maybe," I said softly, "but I need to try." A long silence followed, the time that stretches across years and unspoken truths. Finally, she took a deep breath and picked up a small notebook from the drawer. She said, "I kept this for years, in case you ever wanted answers." She opened to a page with a faded address written in the corner. My pulse raced. "Is this where she lives?" I asked. Mom nodded. "I don't know if she's still there, but it's the last address I had." I stared at the handwriting. Small, neat, certain. My mother's sister. My blood. My connection. My next step. The drive to the address felt unreal. Every mile felt like I was moving closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The locket rested in my pocket, warm against my leg like a heartbeat. The house, when I arrived, was small and old. Peeling paint, faded curtains, a mailbox tilted slightly sideways. I stepped out of the car. My legs felt weak. What if she wasn't home? What if she didn't remember me? What if she didn't want me? What if this was a mistake? But I kept walking, up the path, up the steps, to the door. I knocked once. My heart pounded. The wind rustled the leaves. A dog barked in the distance. Then the door opened. A woman stood there, late 40s, maybe early 50s, tired eyes, soft features, hair pulled into a loose bun, a face full of sadness, but also recognition. She stared at me, as if looking at a ghost. Her lips parted, her eyes widened, and then she whispered, with a voice shaking like she'd waited years for this moment, You look just like her." Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the doorway for balance. "Who are you?" she asked. My voice trembled. "I think I'm your niece." Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes flooded instantly. She whispered one word that made my entire world tilt. "Oh, God, she told me this day might come." For a moment, the world outside that little doorway felt completely silent. Just me, her, and the truth standing heavily between us. The woman, my aunt, took a shaky step back and motioned for me to come inside. Her living room was small, warm, filled with old photographs and the smell of lavender candles. But what I noticed most were the framed pictures on the wall. Not many, but a few. A woman, The same woman from the locket. My mother. Her face looked different in every picture, sometimes smiling, sometimes tired, sometimes staring into the distance like she was searching for something she never found. My aunt gestured toward the couch. "Sit, sweetheart," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. I sat slowly, hands trembling in my lap. She sat across from me, but didn't speak right away. It was like she was trying to gather pieces of herself before giving me pieces of the past. Finally, she whispered, "I knew this day would come. I just didn't think it would be so soon." My breath caught. "Soon?" I asked. "It's been 21 years." She nodded softly. "I know, but when you spend every year wondering where someone's child is, it still feels too soon." Her eyes glistened. "You deserve the truth," she said. "All of it." My heart thudded painfully. "Tell me," I whispered. She inhaled deeply, a shaky, uneven breath that felt like it carried another lifetime inside it. And then she began. "My sister," she said softly, "was the strongest and weakest person I ever knew." She looked toward the photograph on the wall, the one where my mother was smiling, but her eyes looked exhausted. "She was beautiful," my aunt said, "but she was hurting long before you were born." I leaned forward. "What kind of hurting?" My aunt rubbed her palms together as if warming cold memories. "She fell in love with the wrong man," she said quietly, "but not in a bad way. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't violent. He was just broken." My heart clenched. "My father?" "Yes," my aunt whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "Your father loved her more than anything, but he had demons he couldn't fight." She blinked slowly. "Addiction, depression, old wounds from childhood. He was fighting 3 battles at once and losing all of them." I felt tears forming again. "She believed he could save him," my aunt continued. "She tried, over and over, until she broke too." My breath trembled. "One night," she said, voice lowering, "your father disappeared." The words hit me like cold air. "He left a note for her, saying he was going to get clean, saying he'd come back better, saying he didn't want you to grow up seeing him at his worst." Her voice shook. "But he never came back." Silence filled the room, heavy, dense. And then she whispered, "He died 3 days later." I covered my mouth. My chest felt tight. "He overdosed," my aunt said softly. "He didn't mean to. He just lost control." My throat burned. My aunt's eyes filled with sorrow. "When your mother found out," she whispered, "a part of her died too." The room felt smaller as she continued. "She tried to raise you," my aunt said. "She really tried." A lump formed in my throat. "But she couldn't stop crying, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time she held you, she saw him. Every time she saw him, she remembered losing him." Tears streamed down my face silently. "She wasn't weak," my aunt said firmly. "She was heartbroken." She looked at me with soft, mournful eyes. "When she gave you to your adoptive mom, it wasn't abandonment." My breath shook. "It was protection. She thought you deserved a home that wasn't drowning in grief." My chest tightened painfully. "And then," my aunt hesitated. Her voice softened to a whisper. "She left town to heal." I wiped my tears. "So, where did she go?" I whispered. My aunt looked down at her hands. "We don't know," she said quietly. "We never found her. She never came back, never called, never wrote again." I stared at her stunned. "You lost her too?" My aunt's nose reddened. Yes, she whispered. I lost my sister the same day you lost your mother. She reached behind her and took out a small box, worn, old, wooden. I kept this, she said, in case you ever showed up. She placed it in my hands gently. Inside were photographs, letters, torn notes, pieces of a life that vanished before I ever knew it. At the bottom was a hospital bracelet. My name, my birth date, my mother's name. My breath hitched. She kept it on her wrist for weeks after she gave you up, she whispered. She refused to take it off, said it was the only piece of you she had left. My heartbeat trembled violently. She never stopped loving you, my aunt said. Not for 1 second. I felt something warm drip onto my hand. A tear. Mine. Is she alive? I whispered. The question hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament that could shatter at the slightest touch. My aunt closed her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. Her voice broke. I've looked for her, for years, but she disappeared. She didn't want to be found. I swallowed hard. Why? My aunt hesitated. Then she spoke the words I never expected. Because she believed the only way to save you was to stay out of your life. My lips parted. What do you mean? My aunt looked at me with a kind of pain that didn't belong to this moment. It belonged to decades ago. She thought if she came back, your adoptive mom would be forced to give you up again. She didn't want to hurt anyone. Tears streamed down my cheeks. She left, my aunt whispered, because she loved you enough to never let her brokenness touch you again. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She let me cry. Quietly, slowly, like someone grieving a person they never truly met. My aunt finally touched my hand gently. You have her smile, she whispered, and her heart. I shook my head. How do you know? She smiled sadly. Because even now, you're searching for answers, not for yourself, but for her. I looked down at the locket in my hand. My mother's face stared back at me, tired, hopeful, broken, loving. A stranger, a ghost, a part of me. I whispered, barely audible, do you think she ever regretted leaving me? My aunt squeezed my hand. Never, she said. She regretted everything else in her life, but not you. When I stood to leave, my aunt walked me to the door. She paused, her hand resting lightly on the frame. If you ever find her, she said softly, tell her I forgave her a long time ago. I nodded. I will. And tell her one more thing, she added, voice trembling. Tell her I miss her. The sentence cracked in the middle, like something old breaking open again. I swallowed hard. I'll try, I whispered. She nodded, tears in her eyes. You'll find her, she said, like a prayer. Something tells me your mother never left your story. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sky was turning deep orange, and for the first time, I felt the weight of not one truth, but dozens. Truths about love, about heartbreak, about why people leave and why they stay. And somewhere between all of it, the truth she left behind was calling me again. The sun was setting when I left my aunt's house, turning the sky into soft shades of orange and pink, like the world was quietly folding into itself. I walked to my car slowly, my fingers curled around the small wooden box, filled with memories that never belonged to me, and yet somehow belonged only to me. My mother's letters, her photos, her bracelet, her handwriting, her heartbreak. Pieces of a woman I had never touched, but had felt my entire life in the quiet moments I never understood until now. As I sat in the car with the door still open, my aunt's final words echoed in my mind. Your mother never left your story. But if she never left my story, why did she leave my life? That question followed me home like a shadow. When I got back, Mom was sitting on the living room couch, hands folded, eyes swollen, body still. She didn't ask anything. She didn't have to. She already knew where I had been. I sat beside her, and the silence wrapped around us like something fragile and unfinished. Then she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked, as if the apology had been trapped inside her for years. I shook my head. "Mom, you saved me." She looked down. "I didn't save you. She trusted me, and I failed her." "No," I whispered. "You didn't fail anyone. She chose you because she knew you could give me the life she couldn't." Her chin trembled. "But I kept things from you. You were trying to protect me." Silence. Then she whispered, "I didn't want you to hate her." I turned to her slowly. How could I hate someone who loved me enough to lose me? That sentence broke her. She covered her mouth, tears spilling through her fingers. "She never stopped loving you. She just didn't know how to stay." I leaned into her, resting my head on her shoulder for the first time in years. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. Sometimes love is about letting go before the breaking gets worse. Maybe that's what my mother did. Maybe that was her final act of love. That night, I sat alone in my room with the lamp on and the wooden box beside me. I took out my mother's letter again. Her words felt heavier now, not because they hurt, but because I finally understood them. The line that cut deepest was this: "I'm sorry I couldn't stay." Not wouldn't, not didn't, couldn't. Some people leave because they stop loving. Others leave because they love too much, and their love becomes heavier than they can hold. My mother's love was the second kind, the kind that tried its best despite being broken long before I was born. I held the locket in my palm for a long time, her face on one side, mine on the other. Two lives, two worlds, two stories that separated before I ever took my first step. And for the first time, instead of feeling abandoned, I felt chosen. Chosen twice. Once by the woman who gave me life, and once by the woman who raised me. The next morning, I drove to a quiet place outside town, a hill overlooking the river, where the sky always felt bigger and the wind always carried a softness. I sat there with the letter in my hand and the locket around my neck and whispered into the open air, "Mom, I hope you're somewhere peaceful, somewhere safe, somewhere healing." The wind picked up, gentle, warm, almost like a touch on the cheek. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to feel her absence, her love, her pain, her goodbye that never came. And I whispered the only words that felt true: "I forgive you." The wind softened. A bird cried somewhere in the distance. And in that moment, deep in my chest, something finally settled. Not closure, not completely, but acceptance, understanding, and a kind of peace I didn't know I had been searching for. When I returned home, Mom hugged me before I even stepped through the door. A long, tight, trembling hug. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt whole. Not because I found all the answers, not because the story made perfect sense, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally understood that being loved doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like leaving. Sometimes it looks like a letter written 21 years ago. Sometimes love looks like a woman telling her story so her heart can rest a little lighter. Before ending my story, if you're listening right now, tell me in the comments, would you want to know the truth about your past, even if it hurts? I really want to hear what you think. And if this story touched you, moved you, or made you feel something real, please like the video, subscribe, and join me again for the next chapter of Tears and Truths. There are more stories, more secrets, more hearts waiting to be heard, and I hope you'll be there to hear them.